All right, folks. It's another episode of the Gary and Mark Show. And I'm Gary.
And I am Mark.
And we are coming to you. We're live, but we're not live, right?
Something like that.
Something like that.
It's been a while since we've had a recording.
Since July.
Exactly. And so it's good to be back.
Yes, it is.
And, it's been busy. You've added another member of the family.
Another granddaughter. 3 granddaughters now.
That's right. And this one's named
is Riley June.
And she's just a few
4 months.
4 months.
RJ. She was here early this morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you do your share, you and Barbara, of babysitting.
Yeah, we do.
Monday through Friday or Monday through Thursday?
No. Right now, they kind of pop in, and then if Jess's husband is on business during the week, in the evening we'll pop over just to watch so she can go take a shower. She's got a 3-year-old and a 4-month-old.
So.
And then my son, that's a 2-year-old granddaughter. She is spending like Wednesdays and Thursdays and Fridays here. But starting next semester, it'll be Wednesday and Thursday. We're taking our Fridays back.
I think you should.
Yeah.
That's a big commitment.
Well,
3 small children.
I tell you, it's anyone who wants to have a workout program in the Peloton, the membership to the Y, it's all wrapped into grandchildren. Follow them around.
I bet you do. I bet you. But it's fun, right?
It better be because it's exhausting. Yes, it is. It's fun.
So what time did it get picked up in the afternoon?
Oh, sometime between 6 and 7.
That's not the afternoon. That's the evening.
Yeah, morning.
Oh.
And then we meet. I get Gabby and bring her back here, and then we usually have a morning, keep her busy. If it's beautiful, we go outside. And the playground at Jackson Park is great. Gets a lot of use.
And it's fall.
Yeah.
And it has been beautiful.
It has been.
Too dry,
and drought conditions. And I did learn, some folks don't use the word Indian anymore. I mean, what I think of Indian summer. But another term I've recently learned is second summer.
Okay. I like that term.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, it's fall.
Yeah.
And a week or so ago, I had dinner with some friends, and one of them, Dan Cameron, said, I've got you some of my sorghum.
Yeah.
Because we had mentioned years ago, that shows you this podcast has been around longer than people think.
Right.
Not as long as we have been around, but pretty long. We're in season 5, actually.
Okay.
And we had mentioned about sorghum made you feel like fall or something like that.
Yeah.
And I mentioned I knew this guy, Dan, who actually raised his own sorghum, the cane, and did all the work. He cut it, friends cut it. Even one guy, I think, rode around on a lawnmower to...
Yeah, it used to be, in the old days, you'd have a little animal.
Well, he has horses. I'm not sure if he's ever used those or mules. Yeah. He's got all kinds of animals.
Just walk in a circle and crush the cane.
Yep.
And my friend Jerry Brindle, who I worked with at Diamond Brand, actually remembered as a kid you go in and have to kind of pull stuff out while your mule or whatever is going in a circle. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they went for the lawnmower. I think he finally had a friend John would drive it around, I think he said, but then I think they actually got a little motorized version of something, but I think it's not working at the moment. But he remembered that episode, and he was coming to dinner. I hadn't seen him in decades, really. And guess what he brought us?
Yeah, and we're pointing at it.
We're pointing to it right here.
And we're going to have some here shortly.
We are. Stuck on Cane. I think that's the name of his farm or his sorghum operation. And tell us, you were saying people call it molasses, but it's...
But molasses comes from sugar cane, and sorghum cane is a different creature. And molasses is like when you're making sugar, it's like the other stuff but sorghum cane is just, it's its own thing. And you can imagine if you'd lived around here 150 years ago, this would be your source of sugar, most likely.
He mentioned something like that.
This would be your sweetener. And I grew up with it more as a fall and winter thing on biscuits or on country ham. And I have some almost every day.
Well, appreciate Dan Cameron for giving us this. And
thank you, Dan. And because you gave us the sorghum, it prompted me to go make some biscuits, which I'm using the recipe from my friend Ronnie Lundy, who
I did a short on my YouTube channel. Yep.
Yeah, she's got a bookstore,
Plot Hound Books in Burnsville, North Carolina.
And she wrote a book about sorghum.
Oh my gosh, Dan may need a copy of that.
Well, I bet he will need. Dan did. The recipe is from a restaurant, a little kind of sounds like Not Fussy Diner in Paris, Kentucky.
And that they're both from Kentucky originally. Gary's had a cold. You can probably hear that.
Yes. Okay. Wheatus Biscuits from Windy Corner. And I looked it up, and that restaurant's still flourishing. So, Sorghum Savor,
and so
plug Ronnie Lundy again, because after she wrote that book, then she wrote this book, Vittles, about, it's kind of the cooking that she grew up with in the mountains around Corbin, her grandparents. And this book, her writing, won the James Beard Award. So,
and hold that book up another minute. It was not only a few years ago that I realized Vittles is spelled
Victuals.
Where that came from, I do not know. Yeah. Someone has made that up, I think. But so Gary has made these homemade from that recipe.
From Wheatus Biscuits, yeah.
Are they? Did you say they're buttermilk biscuits or just?
Biscuits? They're made with whole buttermilk.
All right, well, we're going to try some here. Okay. What do we do first, Gary? Let's see. Get some music going here.
Yep.
Maybe.
Biscuit music?
I don't know. I'm not having biscuit music going. Oh, there we go. All right, let's try some. All right. We're going to put the mics down for a second. It's going to be messy. Gary was supposed to bring some napkins. We don't have any. How about two? Sounds good. We're not going to show you the whole thing here. So let's just try some, though, while we're... all right. Yeah, spoon me out a little bit. Not too much, because I don't want to get on my recorder. Ooh, look at that. Dan Cameron. I can smell the sweetness. And you said it's not super sweet.
It's kind of a low note.
A low kind of sweetener, he said. All right, that's good, Gary. And these are so gooey. We're going to try them with...
cut them up and kind of
cut them up.
Mop and sop.
All right, mop and sop, he says. All right. All right, Dan Cameron. Let's see how we got... Oh, Gary's still working on his. I'm going to take a bite, Gary.
Oh, yeah.
Woo. Taste that, Gary.
Lick the spoon.
He's licking the spoon. So, if you're listening to us via the audio podcast, you're missing what this looks like. But they're nice little biscuits, half-inch tall. Gary made them. And buttermilk and this pure sorghum syrup from Dan Cameron, Eflin, North Carolina. Stuck on cane. I'll put the info, in case you're ever that way, in the description. What do you think, Gary?
Oh, yeah. Said this was the source, this is the sweetener source for folks who kind of lived out here in the sticks. And it seems like now there are parts of central Tennessee and Kentucky where sorghum is still a bigger deal. I know ours, I grew up in Frankfort, Kentucky, but seems like our sorghum came from somewhere in Indiana, but it's just...
Well, this is from North Carolina sorghum, right here.
It's mighty good.
All right. Well, we're going to not have people watch us eat the whole time, but we need to thank good old Dan Cameron for bringing this to us. If we can get some applause going.
Yeah, boys.
Thumbs up for Dan there. Mm-hmm. Add a little bit of water. We're going to take a short break. Be right back. Right. And we are back, Gary. That was good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
So next up, Gary's going to tell us the beginning of a story.
Well, and it's true.
It is true.
And the reason we're doing it now is it's been about 50 years. And that's a measurable chunk of time. I didn't think about 50 years ago.
No.
But this is about a canoe trip Steve Blizzard and I did for the town of Harrodsburg, Kentucky, which in 1974, Harrodsburg celebrated their 200th birthday. And they were a year before Boonesboro. You know, Daniel Boone, he gets top billing, but Harrodsburg, as the first English-speaking settlement west of the Alleghenies, established in 1774. So in 1974, Steve Blizzard and I...
And Steve was a counselor at
He'd been
camp.
a camper and a counselor at Mondamin. And the two of us, it was not a super historically accurate reenactment, but the two of us paddled a canoe about 300 miles down the Ohio and then 100 miles up the Kentucky. And we had some relighted deerskin jacket. Most of our buckskins were kind of faux buckskins, but we carried flintlock rifles, and we would stop along the way and give a talk about Harrodsburg. And in some places we were welcomed, and most places, there were a few places where communication hadn't been good and they weren't sure who we were. You know, a couple of guys setting off these rifles out in the middle of the river.
And tell us about those rifles you had.
Well, 45 caliber flintlock rifles, replicas, made in Italy of the kind of flintlock rifles that the frontiersmen carried back then. But to get back on how this actually started, I believe it was a fall day in 1973, and I'm at the Rainbow Laundry.
I remember that place.
Not far from here, which is now the headquarters for a plumbing company. But, I was doing my laundry, bored, looked for something to read, and there's a little Ford Times magazine. I don't know if you remember Ford Times.
I do. Mm-hmm.
And there's an article about a fella from North Wilkesboro, Ivy Moore. Ivy Moore had been, I think, a furniture executive, and he was already retired by this time, but he would dress up in full-on buckskins and lead the Daniel Boone wagon train. And I don't know how many years. I think that went for decades.
Goodness.
Some around there. I mean, folks covered wagons going on back roads, but trying to reenact Daniel Boone's path towards Kentucky. And I think from reading that, I thought, well, let me try and get in touch with him. And in the 70s, you could send a letter to someone, put general delivery. I put Ivy Moore, general delivery, North Wilkesboro.
He would get it.
And he got it. Well, him being a retired guy at the time, like we are now, he jumped right on it and like, hey, why don't you come visit? I got a letter. So I went over and visited Ivy Moore one second summer afternoon, probably in November. And he took me around, showing me where one of Boone's farms had been. And we talked about pretty much what it must have been like back when Daniel Boone lived in that area. Of course, he'd come down from Pennsylvania. Anyway, so I'm home, I guess, in December. I'd gone back my parents' house for Christmas. And my dad had said, well, I told him I wanted to find out more about Boone's route into Kentucky, and he suggested I go to the Kentucky Historical Society and talk to Colonel George Chin. And I'm going to suggest to our viewers, if you want to find an interesting character go Google George M. Chin.
Chin?
2 N's.
2 N.
He had a colorful career. He's known in military circles. He was a weapons expert and invented some kind of a grenade launcher. And he was also had expertise on machine guns. But he in his college days at Center College, he was on the 1921 team that beat Harvard at football.
That's impressive.
I know. That later he was a bodyguard for when Happy Chandler was governor in the 30s. And then in the 40s, World War II, he's going to join the Marines, and Happy Chandler says, "You're too old and too fat." Well, he did join.
How old was he then?
Well, he was in his 40s.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. And, by the time I met him, he was the kind of the titular head of the Kentucky Historical Society, had an office in the old armory. And the armory is perched on this limestone cliff, overlooks the Kentucky River. It's a beautiful spot. So I go in, he's very welcoming. "Come on over and sit down, young man." Sit down with Colonel Chin. And I say, "Colonel Chin, I want to know, I'm trying to collect more information on Daniel Boone's path into Kentucky." And he looks at me and he says, well, that's fine, but you know what you're going to do this year? You're going to reenact Colonel Harrod's route to Kentucky because it's going to be 200 years. And I'm like, huh? And he said, yeah, Colonel Harrod started at Old Fort Redstone on the Monongahela. They paddle down, to where it meets the forks of the Ohio, and then they come all the way down the Ohio River. And then when they got to the mouth of the Kentucky, they paddled up the Kentucky all the way to this little spot, which is now known as Oregon. And there they walked inland for 10 or 12 miles, and that's where they settled back then Harrod's town. He said Colonel Harrod had probably 20, 30 men. I'm like nodding. And he goes, "Oh, that's what you need to do this summer." And
these are no small rivers, meaning width and, speed.
And I'm just, okay, well, that's very interesting. Thank you for giving me that information. It was nice meeting you. And, I go back home and don't really think much about it. And then tell Dad about our visit. And I get this phone call in February or March. It's from a woman who works for an advertising agency in Lexington, Kentucky. And she says, we talked to Colonel Chin. Okay. And because we wanted some people to reenact Colonel Harrod's route to Kentucky. And Colonel Chin mentioned that you had 20 men outfitted and ready to go. And
Colonel Chin had been drinking something.
I don't know if he really told her that, or did she make that up just to see what the response would be. But I said,
did you even have one man at that time?
I said, what I have, I don't have anybody. And I said, maybe I could find another person who would be willing to do this. But I said, we really don't have, that entire trip was like 700 miles.
Wow.
I said, I really don't have time for that. Maybe we could start on down on the Ohio and paddle a portion and then go up the Kentucky.
Which is still hundreds of miles, right?
Yeah, still 400 miles.
Oh.
And she said, well, that's fine. That's fine. If you can get one person. And so
was she going to sponsor you or something?
Well, that was that they would handle the expenses.
Wow. Okay.
So so I called Steve Blizzard and I said, Steve, how you feel about spending 3 weeks in a canoe. We'll be in kind of dressed up, sort of buckskins, be following Colonel Harrod's route down the Ohio and up the Kentucky. And it's so...
Now, he was from Ohio, wasn't he?
He was at University of Virginia, finishing up his freshman year at UVA.
Okay.
And it fit in with his getting out of school, I think, and the arrival date in Harrodsburg, and then he would have to go right back to summer school. But I gave him kind of you want to go do this. We'll camp along the way. Some places, other places, there may be like events. But basically, we're sort of the inexpensive kind of advertising. Hopefully, people will be interested in a canoe heading down the river. And so he was game. He said yes. And only because he said yes, I could call back this lady from the advertising agency and say, all right, let's do it. And so that was how the thing got hatched.
So whose canoe did you use? One from camp, or did they give you one?
It's actually someone. No, they didn't know. Are you kidding? They would. If you recall, I think you were at Mondamin when Jim Stacy.
Oh yeah.
Well, Jim Stacy had an outdoor program, I think called Sage,
at
Lexington, and he had an 18-foot aluminum canoe, and he was okay. I mean, with us spray painting it, which is, I mean, the hunt for a vessel, that took some time, because at first the advertising agency said, well, we're going to fly you up to Chicago, to Ralph Freeze, to the Chicagoland Canoe Base, because he built the models for the reenactment of the Marquette Joliet.
Oh, my goodness.
So they fly me to Chicago, and I'm looking.
Oh, wow.
And, I mean, these are these beautifully constructed replicas, I'm sure cost thousands of dollars. Well, we didn't have that kind of a budget. And
well, you didn't, that lady did.
Huh?
That lady did.
The advert. Yeah. Oh, she just worked for Richard Newman and Associates.
Okay, you remember the name?
I do. Out of Chicago, they and it was very interesting looking at these replicas there in Chicago of these beautiful boats. And of course, what Colonel Harrod and his men had used were cut down big poplar trees and dig them out. Well, that's not going to. We knew that wasn't going to happen. I was not sure at that point how we would find a vessel, but interesting thing, on the next day when I'm getting ready to fly back, front page news was newspaper heiress kidnapped.
Oh.
Patty Hearst.
Uh-huh.
Well, that actually pops up later on the canoe trip, but that's for another episode. Okay. But anyway, that was the beginning, and then it was hunt for the vessel, and then, figure out our route and how long you could paddle each day. And
I mean, you're going downhill at first. I mean, downstream first.
On the
So
Ohio.
How fast?
Well, roughly, I remember Chief, Frank Bell telling us you can walk faster than you can paddle, but it would depend. I mean, the Ohio is such a big river that sometimes, and we're basically heading west, and the prevailing winds were out of the west. So sometimes you would actually use the wind to ferry you across to the lee side so you wouldn't have to fight the wind. But, the Ohio was pretty easy. And I forget, I've got the charts here, how many dams we locked through.
Oh, my gosh.
But, I mean, the advertising agency, the fella that worked for them, Jim Montoya, who has since passed away, and I'm sorry, I'd love to talk to him, because he was the advance man that went, that talked to the Army Corps of Engineers, that talked all the towns we were going to go through, that tried to line up if there was newspaper, radio, or TV. He was the guy that went and set all that up.
And did some of that work, or were we always
too
late or too soon?
No, we were, I would say, almost all the time it worked. The time it didn't work was when we're out in front of this boat dock on the Ohio, and I would say mostly it was gentlemen out that afternoon in May, and I think they'd been having a few cocktails. And what we found, these rifles, if you don't put a ball in the end, if you just put powder, you can load that barrel half full of powder, and you set that thing off, and this sheet of flame plus the noise. Well, we set that off about 100 yards from the dock to let them know we're coming. And then what we saw was like people running
the other way,
the other way, and so I'm sure they thought the Symbionese Liberation Army. We might not have Patty Hearst, but the Symbionese Liberation Army was coming. So there were a few times we were met at boat docks by sheriffs, but most of the time it was a welcoming crew.
You were met by sheriffs because someone had tipped them off these shady people were coming in?
Yeah, who are these? Or sometimes it would be, who are these people?
Because you've not had a real bath in several days, and you're wearing buckskins, and you got a painted canoe, and you're carrying 45 caliber.
Yeah, and learning how, river barges, they are just immense compared to an 18-foot aluminum canoe.
Oh, yeah.
But you'd get in the wake of one of those, and as long as you're at a perfectly 45-degree angle, you could ride those waves.
And you were sleeping out at night, camping out at night?
A lot of nights we slept out, and then some nights people, our first night, it was a couple just lived on the Ohio side of the river, and we slept in their woods and cooked our little meal on their porch. Yeah, I had my Savaya stove.
I think you still have that stove, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Does it still work?
Oh yeah. We sleep in hammocks, little net hammocks. And then some nights it'd be you'd bump into some retired couple who had a very opulent camper. Come stay in our camper. Boom.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, I wouldn't be so generous.
Yeah. And then, once the Kentucky was a chore, paddling upstream for 100 miles. And when we hit it, it was at flood stage. Oh. But by the time we were 60 miles up, that's about my hometown of Frankfort. And it was nice to spend one night in my bed at home.
And there's no cell phone, so you couldn't tell anybody you were on the way. So you just had to show up and your folks
Yeah. No cell phones back then.
And amazingly, when I was driving over here, I said, you didn't have cell phones. They're not going to have a camera in that boat, in this canoe. There won't even be any record of this. And you've got an entire scrapbook of pictures.
I've got a scrapbook, thanks to my mother, made this scrapbook.
And I'll get some pictures of that, and we'll put it on the video portion so people can see that. And
so this coming May, June, Harrodsburg's going to hit 250.
And you've been trying to find out if they're going to have a big ceremony.
Well, I'd like to find out if there's just one day that would be a good day. It'd be fun to show up.
I think you should go up there with your buckskins on. And
I don't have them anymore.
Well,
yeah,
Barbara can make you some.
I still have the key to the fort, which of course, on the day we landed at Landing Run, then they put us on flatbed trailers and hauled us into town.
Your canoe too, you mean?
Yeah, and then it was a bunch of, like the local, I think Ruritan Club from Salvisa, they all were dressed up too. And so we all proceed to march to the fort. And it pretends like, my key opens. And then bingo, that began their 30-day celebration.
Cool. Is that fort like a historic site? So you can still go?
It's a reconstructed.
Right, but it's there as
It's been there. I think I first saw it when I was 10. I thought it was
state
cool.
Historic site or something. Yeah. Harrodsburg, Kentucky. A nice little town. Well, you know what? This has been fascinating, and it's far from complete, your story.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to do this in chapters or episodes.
I would love to.
And we'll let you pick out what we talk about each time. But so we want listeners to stay tuned.
Stay tuned, listeners.
And Gary has a million stories, and we've told some of them, of course, on the podcast. And it's been fun. And I love hearing all his stories over and over and over again. So I'm thinking you and I should go up there in May, take my RV.
Well, I've thought about that. I've thought about that.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
And we could call it a covered wagon or something like that. Yeah, well, Gary, we're going to wrap this up.
Okay, Mark. And, it's been too long. It's great.
Been too long. I'm going to do it. We're not going to wait 4 months till the next one.
No, we're not.
If anybody wants to support us, you can find us at GaryandMark.com on the internet.
We accept money.
We do. Any amount.
Any
we could use some, what do you call them, those things? Sponsors. Been so long.
Yeah.
We had some, but they've been with us 4 or 5 years. We're starting over again. So you could be a sponsor.
You could.
This afternoon, GaryandMark.com. $5 makes you a sponsor.
Yeah.
$10 you own the show, or something like that. Or $10 can be the director. $30 you own the show.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, Gary?
I think that's enough for now,
It's been
Mark.
a good episode.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm Mark.
I'm Gary.
And we'll look forward to the next time.